minutes recovery. And I'm doing them as prescribed.
See, this is where I start to lose him. So he's so into the nitty gritty of the sessions. I'm like, mate, you're doing an Ironman. What's up, guys? Welcome to another video. Today, we're gonna be looking at Lionel Sanders training. Now, these are older videos from back in 2019. There's two of them. Some of the way he talks about training and the things he focuses on, I find I sort of disagree with. But he's got a great channel and I love watching his videos. We're gonna go back to two of his videos from 2019. So this video here is from August 2019 and it's called Lessons on Overtraining.
Usually what I'd end up doing is, I'd be like, oh, I feel great, through 10. So I go through 20, then through 30. Sometimes I would do like 70 straight minutes. And
I mean, what an athlete. Just look at him. He's gotta be one of the most, there's some genetics there with him. Look, the amount of muscle he carries and how lean he is really incredible. I think he's definitely blessed, a naturally muscular guy, just looking at his upper body there.
You're kidding yourself if you think that doing 70 minutes at 70.3 or above race pace.
So what he's saying there is he's talking about how he used to write down sessions, like he'd have the example there was 7 by 10 minute efforts. But then he would go on the trainer and he'd end up he would do 10 minutes and then he wouldn't stop the interval and do them as efforts. He would just keep going and then be doing these long efforts at race pace with his 70.3 pace. So that's what he's talking about. So let's see what he's got to say.
It's not digging yourself a hole. And so, one of the big take-homes from the injury is being like, half of Ironman, professional Ironman anyway, is not beating yourself.
Because he's saying because he does those really hard sessions that he's overtraining and perhaps he's getting injured from that. And that's where I lose him, because I'm like, overtraining is a process that happens over weeks going into months, and it's about weekly volume, monthly volume. That's how you get into a state of overtraining. You don't get into overtraining by doing 70 minutes at a race pace and doing one session too hard. So I don't get it. He's so intensely focused. He's got this amazing sort of mental, for him to do all this training on the trainer, mentally he's such a tough athlete, but he's got this sort of honed in focus on the wrong things. Like he's so focused on, I was going to do 7 by 10 and then ended up doing 70 minutes and I was going to do these intervals at this power. So he's super hyper focused, but like that's not going to cause overtraining. Like he needs to take a step back and go, what on the broader scale in terms of my weeks and months led to overtraining? Like the fact he's saying here he's overtraining because he did sessions that were hard is just BS. You don't get overtraining for doing individual sessions too hard. It's doing weeks and months that are too hard.
To be honest with you, I'd say there's probably only one Ironman I've made it to where I hadn't already dug myself a huge hole that was massively difficult to get out of, and that was Ironman Arizona 2016. Okay,
so he's saying for pretty much most of the races he went to, he ended up going and he was just cooked and overtrained, and there was only about one of them which was for him Ironman Arizona, but that he actually felt good. And I'm not saying that's not valid. I mean, you can overtrain and dig yourself a hole, but you're not doing that with individual sessions. You're doing that as over a process of weeks and months. And I don't like he's trying to give advice, but I think this is a very confusing message for him to say, oh, I did really hard sessions and that made me overtrain. Like, that's very confusing for people, because then people go out and they do a hard session and they think, oh shit, am I overtraining? So, I don't really, that's kind of the point I'm disagreeing with him on.
Because all I did was prep for 70.3 until after 70.3 Worlds in Australia.
Oh, did you see that sweat dripping out? That is, and he's got gloves on that would just be filling up with sweat, and he's squirting it all over the floor. Ugh.
And then did like 4 weeks of Ironman training, and I did my best Ironman performance I'd ever done. Moral of that story is, I gave myself a chance But I didn't overtrain myself to death.
Yeah, that's interesting. So he's saying the Ironman there that he did best in was one where he only started training for it with 4 weeks out. So he didn't give himself an opportunity to cook himself, which is, you know, interesting lesson. Good that he seems to be learning. He's accepted that and learned from it. But again, he's not, that overtraining process isn't happening because he's doing hard individual sessions. It's because the weeks and months are too hard.
So, this is my 7th 10-minuter at right around 350. Last week I did 6 at 340. Doing them on 3 minutes recovery. And I'm doing them as prescribed.
See, this is where I start to lose him. So it's this, he's so into the nitty gritty of the sessions. I'm like, mate, you're doing an Ironman. You're on the bike for, you know, you're going to be on the bike for, how long are they on the bike for? 4 hours or something? Like, and he's like, oh, so I did 6 last week with 3 minutes recovery. And now I'm doing 7 with 3 minute recovery. And I did 350 watts. Now I'm doing 360 watts. And it's like, I think part of it is that I've watched his training. He pretty much exclusively trains on the trainer. And part of that means there's nothing else, when you're on the trainer, there's nothing else to focus on. First, he's on his road bike. He's not on his time trial bike. So you're not thinking about going fast. You're not thinking about your position. When you're a trainer, and especially on Zwift, all you're thinking about is the session. So I think he's overthinking the individual sessions, and he's losing sight of the bigger picture in terms of the weeks and months. And you'll see this in the next video as well. He's always going on about, oh, I did this exact wattage, and then I did this exact amount of recovery, this rest. And I find it's a very strange way for a long distance endurance Ironman athlete to be talking about their sessions, real in the nitty gritty. It's just, no, this is something I would be expecting like a track cyclist or like someone doing, like the video I did on Ashton Lambie. That's something he would be looking at, like the exact to the watt, to the minute intervals. You know, that's more relevant. But for him, I don't get it. I just really don't. I just disagree.
So that I can not overtrain and see my progression. And if you feel great, then...
And he's saying that he's really proud of himself that he's sticking to the 7x10, 7 10-minute efforts instead of doing them all together and stuff, because that's going to stop him overtraining. I'm like, no, you're not overtraining because you strung 7 10-minute efforts and did them at once. You're overtraining because you did your weeks are way too hard. Again, I really think he's missed the point here.
Up the power over the 10-minute. Don't do it for an hour straight. Because, well, you can if you want. Just know that that's taking, every time you do that, that's probably taking, you know, 1/4 to 0.5% off your A-race.
No. So, and then again, he's saying, oh, if I have a 7x10 minute session and I do it as 70-minute block altogether, you know, if you do that, you're going to be overtraining, and that's going to be taking percentages off your performance. I just don't agree. I strongly think he's too narrow focused. He's missing the big picture here. You know, what's wrong with doing a 70-minute effort at race pace? So that'd be a good session if you allow yourself to recover from it.
Just let it be known, and that deep-seated fatigue will show itself. Probably the fun.
Are you with me on this? I hope this is making sense. And now he's talking about you're getting deep-seated fatigue. You're not getting that from one session. You're getting that from months on, not even weeks really. That's months on months where you get that deep-seated overtraining, where you really start to see a massive decrease in performance. It's not from individual sessions. All right, I think I've repeated myself enough for that video. Let's jump over to the other one and let's see what he's got to say. So he's on the trainer again. So that's his third 5-minute effort at 440. Okay, nothing wrong with doing efforts so far. It's so good. So 4x5 at 440. Pretty tough. He's on the road bike again, which I don't quite understand. I mean, if I was him, unless I was doing a really long endurance ride on the road or something, I might go on the road bike, but I would be spending every damn minute on the time trial bike if I was him, especially someone who's newer to the sport. He's got catching up to do, so I would be doing every single session on the time trial bike. Oof. Why do I keep showing that? Interesting, so he's on, this is Zwift. He's not in erg mode, it doesn't look like. This looks like he's doing them in regular free mode. Which I find interesting, something like if you're doing a 4x5 at a set wattage, he said he was doing them at 440, you would have thought that would be a good workout to be doing in erg mode, which is interesting. I'm not sure why. I'm not sure why he's preferred to do them in regular sim mode. I mean, and look at his position. He's not even remotely aero. He's on the tops, totally upright. And I can understand when, I mean, I don't really know the tri season, so he's doing this in February. This video is in Feb. So, you know, maybe this is like proper pre-season or even just coming out of the off-season. He's just trying to build his engine up a bit. But, I mean, I don't get it. If I was someone like him later, newcomer to the sport, trying to catch up, I really would think he should be doing this in his aero position. Or at least be in the drops and like sort of get your back down and get that hip angle closed off. He's like almost, he's almost standing upright. I mean, look at that. That's pretty cool. He's obviously going pretty deep. If he's getting that sort of adrenaline rush, that sort of aggressive kick you can sometimes get at the end of a really, really maximal effort, he's obviously pushing really hard, which is really awesome. It's good to see. Okay. I thought Lionel had finished. I went upstairs and heard him yelling 4 minutes later. He decided to do one extra interval. So he's come out and to do an extra interval. I think that's awesome. That's going to get an amazing, especially in a VO2 max session doing an extra interval, that's an amazing stimulus and potential for big increases in fitness from that. So I think that's awesome. That's not going to lead to overtraining if you manage it. If you factor it into your recovery and you make the necessary adjustments to the rest of the week, that's awesome. So I think it's so commendable that he's doing that, and I just don't really agree that that's therefore leading to his overtraining.
Everything is screaming. Tense up. It hurts. And you just gotta say, no. Tension's not gonna help us.
Yeah, so the other thing with tension is it affects your efficiency and your economy. So cycling, probably to a lesser degree, but for something really that's a lot more technique dependent, like running, if you start to tense up when you're in the hurt box, that'll affect your economy, and therefore it limits your speed you're going to be able to run at, because you know the energy you can produce is limited, and if you're not as efficient or economic when you get tense, that's therefore less running speed that you're going to generate from that energy burn. So it's important to stay relaxed. But then on that, like he's on the trainer as well. Like it's quite easy to stay relaxed when you're on the trainer. Obviously it's not easy to stay relaxed when you're at VO2 max, but when you're on the trainer, there's no bike handling, you don't have to focus. So it's, you know, in a way I would say it is easy to stay relaxed. So I'd probably tell him to get out on the road and be on his time trial bike and then try and stay relaxed. That's what's going to make a massive difference.
That you can push at VO2 max, most definitely.
Let that play actually.
Can increase due to various reasons, and that's what we're working on now.
Yeah, so this is saying, well, you can't really improve your VO2 max in terms of your oxygen uptake, the number, so like your liters per minute or your milliliters per kilogram per minute, that number, but you can increase your power at VO2 max. And again, I mean, yeah, that's sort of interesting, but it's not really relevant. The fact that he's even thinking about these types of things, and he hasn't once mentioned like how this is fitting to the overall week, I find a little odd. And that was probably the main point of this video, was just the way when I was watching a lot of his videos, it's a similar thing, really nitty gritty in the details, and he doesn't have that more zoomed out view. So I think I'll end the video here. This is probably going to be a pretty long one, but I hope you got something out of this video and found it interesting, and I'll catch you in the next one.